Hi, this is Tom. Welcome to my channel. This is a video on the subject of open theism, and I'll be talking about a common misconception in regards to open theism, which we'll get to as I read through uh, this dialogue. So this dialogue was a conversation I was having with ChatGPT, and I particularly liked the way that ChatGPT responded in the midst of the dialogue and decided to make a blog post out of it and use ChatGPT to create the images that we see, which I'll comment on some of them slightly. Okay, to start off with, open theism, ontology of the future. Open theism posits that the future is ontologically open insofar as it contains possibilities that are not yet determined. This is an ontological claim about the nature of reality itself, particularly the future. So let me pause quickly about this word ontology and ontological or ontologically. And what these words mean. Ontology has to do with being, whereas epistemology has to do with knowledge. So the ontology of the future is just saying what the future is really like, what the nature of the future is, what its reality is. And so this is saying that the reality of the future is that the future is comprised of possibilities, not of certainties. Okay, moving on. According to open theism, since future free actions by agents are not determined, they exist as possibilities rather than fixed certainties. And here's the diagram that it drew. I tried to put in past and future, kind of messed that up a bit. The past would be here, and the future is from this point on. And the idea is that under open theism, you don't have a single line. So a single timeline would be what one would see as representing the future in other theological systems. But in open theism, from the past to the present, at this point, then you have a web that expands. And when God looks at the future, since this is what the future is, this is what God sees. He sees the web of possibilities, not some fixed line, because there is no fixed line. There's a web. Okay, moving on. God's omniscience in open theism. In the framework of open theism, God's omniscience is understood as encompassing all that is knowable. Given the ontological openness of the future, what is knowable includes not only fixed events and determined truths, but also possibilities, contingencies, and potential outcomes. God knows the future in the way that it actually exists as a realm of open possibilities rather than predetermined outcomes. And to add a little bit of nuance to this, some of the future, one could say, is determined, whereas other parts of it are open. For example, God has determined certain things, and God is capable of bringing about that which he has determined. Now, under Calvinism, God has determined everything. And so God foresees what he himself is going to do because he's predetermined it. Under open theism, God predetermines some things, and there's other reasons I won't go into, but there's other reasons that certain things can be thought of as determined or predetermined. But the point is that it's a bit more nuanced than this sentence says. It's not that the future is 100% open, but it's comprised of both possibilities and certainties. Okay, moving on. The epistemological aspect. So this has to do with what is knowable about the future. The epistemological aspect concerns the nature and the limits of knowledge. In open theism, God knows everything that can be known. And this is similar to other forms of theism. And this is an important point to be understood, which is that the definition for omniscience is the same for open theism, for Arminianism, for Calvinism, for Molinism. It's the same definition, which is that God knows everything. That's the basic definition. But we could say God knows everything that's knowable. Would be a way of refining it, similar to everyone agrees that God is omnipotent, and omnipotence means that God's able to do anything that can be done. But what is anything that can be done? That's where the rub lies. Like you can say God can't make a square triangle because that's nonsense. Squares are square shaped, not triangle shaped. And we could also discuss whether God can do things that are contrary to his nature. But one could agree on the definition that to be omnipotent means to be able to do everything that one could logically assert is doable. And in the same way, to be omniscient means to know everything that's knowable. Moving on. This is not a limitation on God's part, but a reflection of the actual ontological status of the future. God's knowledge is exhaustive in that it perfectly captures the reality of all that exists, past, present, and possible future. And I would say just past, present, and future would be a more accurate way of stating that. So it's just that the future is comprised of possibilities and certainties, and that's what God's knowledge reflects. And I really liked this image that ChatGPT came up with of depicting God's interaction with the world and his omniscience. Okay, moving on. Implications for divine knowledge and free will. Open theism's ontological stance in the future has significant implications for how divine knowledge and human free will are reconciled. And this would merit a video of its own, so hopefully I'll do that at some point. It says human freedom. Under open theism, human beings genuinely participate in shaping the future through their free choices. This maintains a robust sense of moral responsibility and the significance of human actions. Now, I think all of the different theistic perspectives would agree with this statement, but where the difference comes in has to do with whether or not God is timeless or beyond time or acts within time. And under open theism, God acts within time. God is not bound by time, but God acts within time, and time is as real to God, or let's put it this way, there is a succession of events, and that succession of events is as real to God as it is to people. Now, the difference is that God is omnipresent, and so God is everywhere acting throughout all of the universe in the perspective of events transpiring successively. And this is different than some other perspectives, which one would see. A common illustration would be of God on the top of a mountain peak, kind of looking down at a valley that goes around the mountain, which represents everything that is happening throughout all history. Or one could say that there is an eternal now, that for God, every time is now, past, present, and future. And open theism has a different perspective, which is that there is a past, there is a present, there's a future. And these things, God exists just for God as there is for people, that the present is now for God, just as it is for us, although God is present everywhere. So that part is different. But there is a succession of events, And it's just as true for God that the past is prologue, it's finished, it's settled, it's done. And the same could be said of the present, that when the present becomes present reality, that's fixed, that's settled, that's done, or it becomes done. But the future for God, just as for the rest of creation, is comprised of possibilities in addition to certainties. And where this comes into play in terms of a relationship is that God participates in a relationship in real time, one could say. And so that adds an element to the relationship. In particular, God responds in real time to things that are happening in a relationship, just as human beings respond to one another. So that adds a component of reality to the relationship. Reality isn't the word that I'm quite looking for. I don't know, spontaneity, genuineness. The point is that just as in a human relationship, what my spouse does impacts what I do, and vice versa. In the same way, what we do impacts what God does. Now, this particular idea is common within Christianity, in particular, the phrase that it's part of God's plan to do things that He would not otherwise have done because we ask Him. And Jesus Christ taught this in the Sermon on the Mount. So that idea is a common idea that God responds to prayer, that God responds to the things that we do, that what God does is impacted by what we do, what we ask Him to do. Now, there's a difference of opinion about how this works within Christianity, but there is a segment of Christianity that this idea has been believed for centuries. And where Open Theism sort of adds a new perspective to this conversation is that the fact that God is acting 100% within time adds a genuineness, adds to a level of gravity, gravitas to the reality of the interaction that we have with God. So, as I said, this would be a good topic for a video in and of itself. And I already spoke more than I intended to on this, but I think it's an important point, and would like to develop this further. But I think this is one of the highlights of open theism that